Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richard Barnaby, and I am chairing this afternoon's session, question and answer session, on the theme of low carbon, high skills, which is subject of discussion earlier this morning. So I'm going to ask, first of all, the panellists to introduce themselves, starting off on my right.
Hello, I'm Paul Kirby, formerly a consulting engineer in building services, and I now lead the programme in architecture and environmental engineering at University of West of England.
Elena Marco, senior lecturer and program leader of the architecture and planning course, and
Bill Gething, I'm an architect. I was a partner at Field & Clegg Bradley for some years, 30 years. I'm now a sustainability consultant. That's it.
Good afternoon, Dr. Sergio Altomonte. I'm an architect by training. I'm associate professor at the University of Nottingham, where I lead the Part 2 diploma in architecture.
Right, let's get started then with the first question, which I think is going to be from Sarah Hills.
From the projects that you've been involved with, what have you learned about supporting users to optimise the energy efficiency of a building?
Who would like to start off with that? Who would have some experience? Bill, perhaps you're the most obvious one to start with there.
I think sort of step one is to talk to the users, if you can. I think it's really important that the design team and the people who are going to use the building are aligned in what they expect from the building. I think there are quite a lot of examples of buildings where the design team, high-powered design team, produce a building that's all singing, all dancing, fantastic BMS, etc., and the users thought they were getting something where you opened a window and turned on a radiator. So there's a complete mismatch between what's being delivered and what the users actually wanted. And also just understanding who the users are going to be. And I mean, obviously, some buildings you can invest quite a lot of time teaching someone how to use a building or interacting with them on how a building should be used. But there are a lot of buildings where you can't do that. You can't have a 3-day course on how to operate a classroom if you're a supply teacher. It all has to be intuitive. So I think keeping things simple and doing them well is a sort of golden rule. Not getting things too complicated. Not over-promising. So don't promise carbon emissions that you're not going to achieve or explain why you might not achieve them. All of those sorts of things.
Thank you, Bill. Sergio, you've got obviously international experience and post-occupancy evaluation, so what do you think?
It's actually quite an interesting question in terms of how the user perceives the building, how the user understands the building. And I definitely echo Bill's position of trying to anticipate what a user will actually understand of the building and actually make things as simple and as intuitive in a sense as possible. Most of the times, a design team will spend quite actually a lot of time and quite a long investment in terms of the design process in engineering or sometimes over-engineering solutions, which then obviously work and can deliver determinate targets in terms of carbon emission, in terms of energy savings. But most of the times, the user feel completely devoid of any attention. So we are not really sometimes trying to figure out how a user will perceive the environment. While on the other end, the other aspect that has to be, I think, quite well emphasized is how much the designer sees himself as a user. So asking yourself the question, what would you do if I'm designing an office which is facing in a winter morning where you have sunshine, and yes, you're gonna have glare, but on the other hand, from a user perspective, you want to have that glare because you want that refreshing sun to wake you up. So sometimes the optimal solution is not necessarily the best solution that the user will want to have. So I think that getting that sort of wider perspective is quite important.
Thank you. Paul, what about you?
Well, having been a consulting engineer in specified control systems, I can hold my hand up to getting it wrong on one occasion, certainly, where it was very much a centralised, computer-operated building management system for a school, and the person who running it was the caretaker, who actually didn't know how to, couldn't, and it was way beyond their responsibility. And that was my failure as a member of the design team in understanding actually who would be operating that building. I think there's also a problem with the controls industry, and best summarised by a quote that was told me from someone within controls who said, "We sell dreams and install nightmares." And I think there is a level of sophistication in control systems that are just beyond most people. We live in a society where, unfortunately, it is still amusing that people don't know how to operate electronic devices in their homes, CD players and the like. And we kind of have to accept that that is true. And we have to, as I said, make controls very intuitive, very simple, and where possible, mechanical with levers and dials, rather than software hidden in boxes. But if I am to forgive the design team slightly, I think there is also can be a difficulty with clients. Certain clients, in that you go as a member of design team, say, I need to understand your business or your operation or your school or your hospital. I need to speak to the users. And they say, oh, we can't possibly speak to the users. They might get ideas about what we're going to provide for them. And actually, that can be a real problem. And there is a separation between those commissioning a building and those who are actually going to use it.
Lena.
I want to phrase the question differently. For me, I found two types of things. Like one, when we were working in projects like the National Trust, where the client is someone who has got an ethos and a philosophy that they kind of live by in a way. I think the type of users are more receptive, are getting, wanting to know how the building operates and works. Then on the other side, I've got users which are completely don't want to know anything about it. We did a housing scheme in Spain, and the user just wanted a house. It was a social housing. They just wanted a house. I don't care how the ventilation system works. So I think it's different types of learning. Depends on the user, and I think the ethos behind, let's say, a local authority, a client, organization, is going to be quite important in the way that people want to learn about how to use the buildings. And I think, does that make any sense what I'm talking about? It's just, I think if the Spanish government, local council, will approach it differently and saying it's part of our ethos. And there is a lot of organization like One Planet Living nowadays where they sell you a lifestyle. So they don't sell you a house or a building, they sell you a lifestyle where you buy because you want to kind of subscribe to that, because you want to use the buildings better.
Thank you very much. I think one of the issues which is coming out of this is that actually you need to know who's in control. We have problems with our buildings, and I happen to know because I know who the energy manager is, and I tend to phone her up and ask a question. But that is not known generally by people, and that information isn't generally available. So who takes responsibility for that? That's really a difficult problem, especially in a university. I think it's very different in an office building where you might have essentially the same group of people working in the space all the time, but there's such a transitory group of people working in the buildings that we have.